All right, well, while we wait for James, we can go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to welcome everyone today to part 3 of our Roundtable series, IT Security Challenges, Protect What's Important. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that they are on mute and their video is off, but if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat feature to our panelists and we will get your questions answered. This roundtable is being recorded and the recording will be sent out as well as listed on our YouTube channel. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And at first, we have Matt Briggs, Director of New Business Development, Sean Trojak, our IT Practice Security Lead, and James Melchor, our CTO, who will be joining us shortly. I'll now hand it over to you guys. Go ahead.
Sure. So, hey guys, thanks again for the time. Really appreciate it. Again, as with other roundtables, we'll run for 30 minutes. And the format is rapid fire Q&A with members of the DYOPATH Brain Trust. So we've got Sean on, who's our IT security practice lead, and James, our CTO, will be joining shortly. Just to reiterate, ping Jordan with questions via the chat feature. We're happy to answer your questions as we go along. We want to keep this interactive, I would say, from that perspective. And then we'll certainly address any lingering questions if we can't get to them after the fact. So in regard to the content, this is part 3 of a 3-part series focused on IT security, protect what's important. And today we want to really round things off with talking about focusing alignment of security programs, policies, procedures to address business risk. And I know this is something that's near and dear to Sean's heart in particular. And then we also want to discuss, how cybersecurity challenges IT operations, among some other topics as well. So to kick things off, Sean, for you, can you talk about the importance of aligning an organization's security program to address and cover business risk?
Yeah, certainly. So I think probably, the first point I would look at is just, a lot of organizations, they're kind of coming into this game. All of a sudden, they've got this heightened security awareness. We're seeing it everywhere. And I think there can kind of be this first impulse to just go buy some tools, right? Let's do that. And don't get me wrong, there can be value to some of that. And I'm gonna give the example of a car, like I always do. You need a spare tire. You know you're going to need a spare tire. You maybe don't particularly care for the performance characteristics of it, right? Whether it's a donut or a full size or whatever, but you know that you're going to need one, right? So some tools you're just going to have to get. But back to your question on the security program, I think what you're going to find is that what you really want to do is kind of align where that business is headed. That means, resourcing. Are we starting to grow? Do we have grand plans in the future? Or are we going to stay about the same? What are we doing? So that IT shop and the security shop kind of know what to do. Furthermore, you want to kind of get that business's risk appetite down on paper. In the past, before this kind of great wave of security awareness, what used to happen was businesses would say, "Hey, I don't want to deal with this IT stuff. You guys deal with that, and we'll do our business." But I think that needs to change. That whole mindset needs to change to where there needs to be some understanding of what is truly important to the business, and then you have to map that all the way down to the applications and to if a hacker breaks in, does that impact our business or not? Do we care or do we not care? And that will translate into spend and everything else in your security program.
Right. So it definitely seems to me that IT teams have good intentions when they're investing in tools. However, may not be fully aligned. To your point, I mean, we see that a fair amount. So helping them zoom out a little bit. I know that's a conversation we have. And the other thing too is I would say where the business is headed creates these different security catalysts. And we talked about it in a webinar a week or two ago. Just looking at, are there new clients, right, that an organization is going after that might need, their vendor to apply a specific framework, right, or be compliant in certain areas, as an example, right, or is an organization going to move into a different geography? Maybe they go and want to do more business in the EU, right, and then there's regulation and compliance that would be hanging over their head there. So it's a really good point about looking at where the business is going and then understanding what security catalysts might come out of that. So good point. James, anything else to add there? James?
I think you're on mute, James.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, guys. I said y'all pretty much covered it. I think the main thing, at least from my perspective, is the business, the different service organizations within a business really have to be aligned, right, to understand what each other's doing. And from that perspective, if they don't, right, that's really where you get some major issues, right? And if they're not, new initiatives that are coming about that are going to really cause some major security issues, really don't get addressed, right? Those fall through the cracks. So I think that alignment is critical between the different, service organizations, being like sales, operations, and IT. So. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say one other thing, just an example. One of our clients, has to do, work in, the defense industry base. And so we've talked a lot about even the tools, right, that are invested in, the business is dictating what those tools are because, for somebody that works with the Department of Defense, they may need to be, FedRAMP compliant, right? And there are a lot of tools that are commercially available off the shelf that aren't. So just, I guess, food for thought, another example there. So sticking with the topic of, making sure that there is alignment, what are some of the challenges of implementing a security program that maps to business risk, for the audience? Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a little bit of history to this. So I grew up on the security side. So from my point of view, the biggest challenge is really one of communication. And for the longest time, the security world has not been able to speak the language of business. We've not been able to translate the risks into terms that the business will understand. And then what that happens is on the business side, the whole thing can become viewed as just a money pit, right? It's like you guys are always spending money on something or another. And so I think there's some important tools that kind of help with that resistance on the one side and the communication on the other side. I'm gonna give you guys 2 bullet points. One is a risk acceptance or assessment process. And so that is a tool that allows you to go to the business and say, hey, this is the risk that you are implicitly accepting if we don't have this or that type of control. The other is some level of data classification, because ultimately that security spend needs to be mapped to the value of these things that you're trying to protect. And I will admit that in the security world, we can also be guilty of saying, "Ooh, cool tools. We want to go after that," and maybe they're not necessarily needed. So I think you'd have to have both of those. There's that kind of informed spend on what's happening, and that's how you really get that security program mapped out.
Yeah, absolutely. James, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, really, I think one thing that has to happen is, or could be a challenge, is not really understanding what the tech stack is, right? From a security program perspective, right? When you're talking about alignment. So if an organization doesn't understand the tech stack that they have and how that services the rest of the business, it's very difficult to align risk to the organization, right? Because if you do and you have it clearly defined, then you're able to map back risk to, you know, really an application or a certain area, and then show that correlation to a tech stack. I think one of the biggest challenges is that confusion in trying to get funding for something because you can't, you know, correctly articulate like what the risk is and what it impacts. And it's kind of scary to see how many organizations really don't have that defined of a tech stack.
I'm going to build on that one real quick. I'm going to think of a more real world case for you guys. You know, I love to talk about cars. I send my wife, my poor wife, she goes to the mechanic, and, you know, she's always afraid to go there because she doesn't understand cars. And so I'm sometimes afraid that she's going to come away with all kinds of things that we don't really need for our car in terms of repair and so forth. So that goes exactly to James's point. And I think everyone can understand that. Unless you kind of have that understanding, it can be difficult. It's right on point there, James.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, James, this one's for you because we spend a fair amount of time talking about cybersecurity and the challenges it creates within an organization's IT operational unit, right? Just in general, that function. So what are some of the biggest issues that you see, pressure, cyber putting on, day-to-day IT operations?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's skill set, right? It's knowledge. All right, that's a big one that we see is the talent that is required to really understand what cybersecurity is. The second one is really the second one from that perspective is the amount of workload required, right? That I think people really underestimate the amount of time that it takes to really operate a true good cybersecurity kind of program.
Yeah.
And that is something not to take lightly, right? And the reason I say that is, IT is extremely important, but cybersecurity or security as a whole really entrenches itself into the entire organization, because everything you do with an organization, from sales to ops to you name it, right? You're rolling out IoT stuff, like everything is exploitable, right? The people, the processes, the tools, you name it, right? So not understanding that approach, I think, is really what's kind of, in my mind, really impacts IT as a whole, right? And that goes back to the skill sets and talent. So,
okay, Sean.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to that one, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So Sean, over to you. And James, you can't roll your eyes at me because I know James is, I think he's sad that he said, hey, Matt, you got to think of cybersecurity as, as a journey versus a destination. And now he's heard me say it, 100 times in meetings, but, it was an aha moment for me. And I think certainly for, people that are attending, hopefully you guys walk away with this, and you probably heard us say this, but what are, the different components of that journey, and, how do they feed into each other? Because you can never stop, right? You have to continue to evolve to meet modern day threats head on. So Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to go a little bit philosophical here on that one. So, when I kind of started this, I said, well, you have an assessment or incident response typically is at the top of a big circle, if you can imagine that. So we would have entities that come to us via incident response. Oh no, help us put out the fires. And then you've got someone that says, we just want to know how bad it is. Just let us know how badly we're performing. We'll fix the gaps and so forth. So that's where it would typically start. And then what you would do is you would move into training. And a big part of that was to, not only for the end users, but to help soften the ground with the executives. Because again, it goes to my earlier point, they didn't always understand what they're paying for, and, why it seems from their perception, seems to be, a bit of a black hole, right? And then you would move around. You'd want to get your policies and your procedures and whatnot sorted out. Start building out the programmatic aspects, and then eventually you get the services and tools, and you swing back around to the full circle. So that's kind of the picture. And then, as part of our own journey, I think what we're have come to the conclusion is that even that model is now becoming outdated. And the reason for that is that you take that security program aspect, and really that encompasses all of those components, right? So there's your assessment, there's your training, there's your incident response, all those things. And so what I'm seeing is, look, that's where the journey started, but now we have to evolve that model to where we're providing security on an ongoing basis. That's just what it is. And I think kind of the cool thing to all of that is that a lot of businesses, they'll say, you know what, we just want to do our business. We didn't want to get into this security game. It's a lot of fun, don't get us wrong, but we'd rather do banking or oil or whatever it is that we do. And so I think as this model starts to mature in industry and so forth, that we're going to see a lot more of it, taking it from that approach, where it's just ongoing security service.
Yeah, great. Did James roll his eyes? I can't see.
Nope, I did not.
All right. So thanks for that. So James, this one to you, and put your CTO hat on. And we're gonna move into kind of trends in 2021. What are some of the things that our attendees are going to consider or need to consider adopting as the whole cybersecurity attack landscape changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sean, great segue actually into this about service, right? Things changing from, the traditional ways into service. So the big thing for me is really it's security really becoming a service within an organization. And I don't mean the tooling, I mean the program itself needs to be a service within the organization, because if you look at it, Matt, really going back to what we said about, it's a journey, not a destination. It's like time; it keeps going. Doesn't matter what you do, it's always going. So you need to be moving forward, right? And that's kind of the way I see security and security service. At some time, and it's already getting there, the pace, right, that we have to keep from a security perspective. You have to depend on a service, and just think about how many services are out there right now in our life that we subscribe to on a daily basis, right? Security is kind of falling into that, is the pace of it. You got to really be skilled, you got to be niche, you got to really know it, and a lot of companies cannot afford the investment that's going to take, right, to get done. So the big one is I just see a consolidation of these tools and other things like that really getting converted into services and delivered in a service. And I just honestly, my point of view is that's the trend, right? And that's only going to ingrain within the business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sean, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think he nailed it. So, I mean, it's just gonna be more of the same. I think maybe part of it that we could talk about, though, is, there's some organization, I know how to say it. We can certainly say, security as a service while we're here on this panel, and that might seem a little bit ivory tower for participants, because they are where they are,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to somehow get there to perhaps a higher plateau. And so maybe today they have the antivirus, and maybe they have some policies and procedures. Don't use your mother's name for your password, stuff like that. They may have some of those things already, but then looking at them from that point of view, they may say, "Man, how in the world do we get to this more evolved space?" And so I think there's going to be a lot of questions on how to get there.
Yeah. I see it repeat, Sean. Remember the cloud days early on where it was like, what do I do? How do I get there? Should I go there? I already have these investments. Like, that's the stuff we're hearing today with security and converting to security services, right? And at the end of the day, at least from my perspective, security service has to be modular, right? It has to be portable, and then at the same time, it has to take in consideration that clients have investments already made, and if it's not, that is to my mind like the ivory. They're never going to get there, right? Unless the service can accommodate those type of things, just like cloud did, right? Cloud converted and kind of shifted and molded into something that was easier for people to consume. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll throw my 2 cents in, around, creating, the program, and security service within the organization. We're seeing a lot more opportunities as it relates to virtual CISO, because I think organizations are saying, back to the point that there may be a little bit of a skill set gap, and folks understand, all right, I've made those investments in those tools. I've still been breached. There's still been anomalies. The tools aren't the silver bullet. And so now it's time to take a step back and engage, resources that can help craft or create this sort of program and programmatic approach, and then back to, alignment with, business risks. So, one of the trends we're seeing is just more virtual CISO engagements in general. And then if we were to be more tactical, James, I heard you say this, rather than looking at it from an incident response standpoint, it's incident containment, right? So it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. If, an organization is mature enough, has the tools, the people, and the process to, contain those, those things that happen, right? The breaches. So, okay. Well, I promised Sean that we'd get to his security dashboard. So Sean, maybe if you can share your screen, and I'll frame things up.
Oh, sorry, I was not prepared to do that.
That's all right. If you can bring it up, I do have a question for James while that's happening. So, we talk a lot about continuous improvement in general, whether it's cyber related or IT support. What strategies, James, would you recommend, or do we even employ, to help our clients continuously improve their security program and posture?
Yeah. So, really at the end of the day, Matt, to improve a program itself is really continuous improvement, right? It has to be built that way. So, what we have to do, for our clients and things like that is really build those components in there, right? You're never done. So part of the program is really instilling the assess component of it. Where are you at? Where do you need to go? What are you doing today? And constantly understanding, what's occurring to adjust, right? So there's almost like a feedback loop that also needs to be built into a security program from other service organizations, right? Because the other thing is, I saw a great little video, actually on LinkedIn, and it was like security, right? And then it showed password complexity, and it was like a cat walking through a door, and then they just shrunk it and shrunk it and shrunk it. So basically you couldn't do anything, right? And it was kind of funny. But honestly, that's where like a feedback loop comes into play, right? You need to understand what you're doing, how is it impacting the organization. But it's a self-assessment, has to be built into it. You're constantly looking at the vulnerability piece, you're reassessing, and you got to build it so you don't fall into that trap of that's the way we've always done it type thing, and check the box, right? So you got to put those kind of, I would say, checks and balances in place to ensure that doesn't happen as well either. So
yeah, and then I'll give you a real life example, for the attendees, and then Sean can talk about this. We had a client this morning ask whether penetration testing, and that can mean a lot of different things, was necessary once managed security was put in place. So SOC as a service, SIEM, EDR, vulnerability management, analyzing traffic and the like. And the answer is, if you're not testing continuously testing, then there's no way for you to evolve because you're not going to understand where there could be weaknesses and how to adapt, right, as things move on. So I thought that was a pretty interesting conversation from this morning. So anyway, Sean, you talk us through this dashboard and how it might feed into continuous improvement.
Certainly. So, and this is just kind of a sample, okay? But what you find is that there's kind of this dream of single pane of glass. You can kind of see everything at once, and so that's one of the things that we've been doing in terms of how we build out security programs. So just looking here at a glance, the whole idea is that you have an idea of what's going on in your environment, not only from a traditional vulnerability management standpoint. Do you have patches coming due soon? Are they overdue? Is someone maybe not keeping up with them for some reason? You've got maybe the high risk items need to be applied within a certain SLA. But then you've also got what we call events of interest. So those are someone's banging away at your servers or your network equipment, or you couple that with maybe how long does it take to respond to some of these things. So there's these metrics is the point, and these don't necessarily have to be the metrics that everyone would look at. But what you'd want to do is kind of get an idea. I've got this program, and it's heading in a certain direction. But do I have a speedometer? Do I have the right tools to see if we're going and trending in the right direction? And part of that would include looking, let's say the controls, and depending on which control framework you've selected, maybe it's a CIS top 20, or maybe you have to bear the full weight of something like a NIST 853. And so just trying to understand, okay, well, how well are those implemented? And then, what is the status of the testing and evidence and all those types of things? And then you get a little bit further and see what is on the horizon. Do we have big, threats or vulnerabilities like that big exchange bug that everyone's been dealing with lately, or a lot of people have been dealing with, and compliance deadlines and so on and so forth. So what we're driving towards, though, is some kind of way of communicating to management how things stand. And so you could add other things like how are your backups doing, and all kinds of information. They can kind of see at a glance how we're doing. What types of risks are we accepting? Do we need to spend money here? Do we need to reel it back a little bit? We're kind of covered, and so on.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. So, Jordan, we're at about time. So I think if there are any questions that landed in the chat, we can circle back with the attendees and answer those maybe at the same time we send out the recording. So that's it. Thanks for everyone's time. Jordan, back over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining our roundtable today. A reminder, a recording will be sent out and also listed on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to attend any of our additional roundtables or webinars, they are listed on our events page on DYOPATH.com. All right, I hope everyone has a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you for attending.